The spinal cord consists of a complex system of nerve fibers running from the brain to the base of the spine. This acts as a telecommunication system between the brain and the rest of the body, thereby enabling the body to function properly. Damage that cord and your telecommunication system goes haywire, usually permanently, and this means confinement to a wheelchair. The spinal cord is a very delicate structure, and it does not take much to cause permanent paralysis. This was clearly brought home to me by a leading scientist who explained that it is just this amount of pressure on the open, exposed spinal cord which is sufficient to cause permanent paralysis. There are no available figures in the United Kingdom of how many people are paralyzed, but in the United States, at present the paralyzed population is 500,000, and a further 15,000 people every year end up in wheelchairs. Spinal cord injury paralysis strikes the old and young alike. Being fit and healthy is no protection. No one is really free. No one is free from the risk of it happening to them.
Some men are winners from the day they are born. Happy and healthy, what could go wrong? But sometimes the story doesn't start out the same, and the joy of a new life is turned to pain when the beautiful baby is crippled or lame. So turn your head away if you don't want to see. Say, well, I'm sorry, but what's that to me? Pour another drink and think of something new, but remember it could happen to you. One day it could happen. One day it could happen to you.
I was out one evening with my boyfriend, and we'd been to a pub, and we'd met up with my brother and several other friends. And it was when we were driving back, I was on the back of his motorcycle, and we hit a stationary vehicle. Both my boyfriend and I were injured. He broke a leg, I broke my back, which is why I'm now in Stoke Mandeville Hospital.
1 person in 10 in Britain is disabled. Trini is one of them. Just a few months ago, she was leading a normal, healthy life of a teenager at school. But now we see her at the National Spinal Injury Centre at Stoke Mandeville. One of the doctors treating Trini, director of the National Spinal Injuries Centre, Dr. Hans Frankel.
Well, the disability we deal with here is spinal cord damage, which in most cases is caused by an accident. There are a few diseases that cause a similar severe impairment of the spinal cord of sudden onset, but most of our patients are from accidents. The commonest being road accidents, cars, motorcycles, pedestrians, and the next commonest being industrial accidents, where people fall off buildings or things fall onto people. And finally, there are quite a lot of sporting accidents, gymnastics, horse riding, diving into shallow water. And all these injuries can damage the spinal column, which can injure the spinal cord, which runs within it. The spinal cord is the main nerve supply to the body. And if the nerves in the spinal cord are physically severed, there's nothing known to medical science at the moment which can mend those nerves. The consequences of that are immensely serious. Not only is there paralysis of all the muscles below the injury, there's also a loss of feeling and a great deal of trouble with the bladder and bowel functions.
When you first come here, you are just kept absolutely immobile in bed for a couple of months. The nursing has to be very intensive, and they're very careful the way they treat you because you're not in a brace or a splint or anything. And after the couple of months are up and they establish that your back is, the bone has healed, they start to put you up in your chair, and from then on, you have 2 types of treatment. One just to keep you occupied and keep you happy, because obviously that is an important point. And another to actually prepare you for the world outside. and that takes the form of physiotherapy, which is rather grueling, and you don't think you can do it right at the beginning, but gradually everything comes together, and the physiotherapists are very good, and everyone seems very kind.
Okay, Trini, shall we start? Nice big lift, high as you can. That's right, and down. Good. And down.
To occupy your mind as well as improving things like balance, which are dreadful. You have things like archery and swimming, and there's occupational therapy where you can do handicrafts, sewing, and really generally what interests you. Everyone's very keen to make sure that you are enjoying yourself as much as possible.
Girl on a motorbike, wind in her hair, so full of life, as free as the air. The vision was shattered in a wet country lane, and Trini woke up imprisoned in pain. But nothing can hold her, she'll break free again. But turn your head away.
Although at the moment Trini is getting complete support, when she returns to society, she's going to face the reality of life in a wheelchair. Sadly, this is going to be a permanent situation unless hope is found for a cure through research. One disabled person whose life was changed in a split second is Philip Scott.
I was working in the film industry and doing a variety of jobs there. And I also started doing motor racing too at Thruxton. It was while I was at Thruxton I had a slight accident. It was quite colossal at the time. I was doing a practice day, and it was a cold, wet morning, and I was going through a series of curves, and it was just coming out of one of those curbs I hit the dreaded mud. This mud, I just happened to get one wheel on it and crank the car up sideways. I was doing about 80 at the time, I think, roughly coming out the corner. And I went straight into a marshal's post. The force, about 80 miles an hour, sideways, just broke my neck. The ambulance came very quickly, and the fire brigade. And it was quite a bit of time until they actually got me out of the vehicle indeed, because they had to go and cut the middle section of the car to pieces, because it was imperative that my neck wasn't moved, bent or anything. And they then lifted the middle section of the car into the ambulance, and I was then cast off to Salisbury. And there I spent my first night in hospital in Salisbury. And a day later I went to Stoke Mandeville, which was a very different experience than I ever experienced before. Yes, I still enjoy going to motor racing. In fact, I went quite recently and saw a friend of mine, Carl Jeans. And I remember when he was sitting in the car and I was chatting to him that I was wondering what he was thinking about just before his race. I've heard some drivers say that after they came to visit me in hospital, they had very bad times when they drove around the circuit, because it must affect you in some way to see a friend or a colleague lying in there who got there purely because he was going about enjoying something that he was doing quite a lot of or something. But yes, people do tend to slow down and think after a while what they're doing.
The horrifying fact that dismayed Philip's family and friends was that nothing was being done. Philip, like so many thousands of others, still have hope for a cure. Imagine what it must be like for the family of a 2-year-old boy to face the future without hope. Judy Kilby experienced this when her son Jason was paralyzed in an accident. What was her first reaction?
Well, the obvious feeling for me was, why? Why my child? Why was it my child that was run over? And then shock. Very badly shocked, obviously. It took me quite a long time, really, to get over it. In fact, Jason helped a lot in the way that he's accepted his injury. He helped us an awful lot to cope and to accept the fact that he's in a wheelchair.
Well, I got knocked down by a car quite a few years ago when I went into Stoke. I've had a few press sores and I had to keep going back into hospital for checkups and operations, like clipping my ankles and my hip operations, and on my back, and that I was in for a long time there.
He was in Stoke for about 16 months after his accident, and that is when I definitely realised what had happened. It wasn't really until then that I realised, because you had a child that went out that wasn't in a wheelchair, and when he comes home he's in a wheelchair, and it does make a big difference. Certain things you sort of have to build around Jason. You can't get away from that, but we try as much as we can for our daughter's sake and for everyone's sake to lead as normal life as possible, and I think this is what Jason would want anyway. He hates to be fussed over. He doesn't like to feel any different, and he isn't any different than you or I, apart from the fact that he can't walk, and therefore he doesn't want it to be treated any different.
I've done swimming, archery, basketball. At school I started the javelin and the shot and kept on with my swimming. And I started football a few months ago and cricket.
We were very thrilled that he won the Young Citizen of the Year award this year because he did a swim, because he raised, I think it was about £1,500 in 2 hours, that they nominated him for this award, and for his age group he won it, and we're obviously very proud of him.
I'm a member of the YOC club. The teacher got me interested in it, and I've been interested in it ever since I've been out from Musselbat School, and I buy a lot of bird books. I've been a member for 5 months, and at the moment I brought 10 bird books throughout that period. And I go on the nature trails with the school and go into bird hides and watch the birds. I think it's really good fun.
Quite honestly, before, I hadn't really thought an awful lot about it. You see people in wheelchairs, but you don't realise exactly what it means, because it's not just the fact that perhaps they can't walk, or even some people can't move their arms. There's all the other things that go with it, which are equally really important. And it's opened my eyes an awful lot. I just didn't comprehend really what it all meant.
I'm interested in model making as well. At the moment, I've got a job for somebody that my dad knows. I get £3 for a model that I do. That is making it, spraying it, and doing it all up. That's good fun. Well, I'd like to sort of be able to walk, and I'd like to be a truck driver when I grow up. I hope something come along so that I can drive lorries about and get up into the cab by myself and help load the trailers and unhitch them and sort of see to the engine and change the wheels when they need changing. That'd be good.
You never give up hope. You must never ever give up hope, and I hope that Jason's never given up hope, which I'm sure he hasn't, because I don't know how you would go on living if you did. It's very, very important to just think, no, I'm perhaps not just going to sit there all the rest of my life, that perhaps one day someone might come along with something and be able to help me, and do something about the injury. If the money's forthcoming, which I just hope that it will be, because it's so important, it's such an important thing that they're doing, and it's going to help so many hundreds of people, that if the money is forthcoming and they do come up with something, operation or whatever, I would only be too willing, and I'm sure Jason would too, to take any part in anything like that.
We have seen a few examples of how people's lives have been instantly transformed. With recent advances in medical science and technology, it is now possible to explore ways of trying to cure paralysis. Spinal cord research is one of the most neglected areas of medicine today. The International Spinal Research Trust aims to promote, identify, and fund promising research in this field. It must also be emphasized that the results of our frontier research program could also benefit many people suffering from back pain and other neurological disorders. We are closely collaborating with research efforts in the United States and other parts of the world. We don't want to falsely raise people's hopes, but the fight against paralysis is gaining ground, and scientists are convinced that there is some light at the end of the tunnel. We are asking you to help us in our task to raise the urgently needed funds for spinal cord research. If nothing is done, we will be seeing people in wheelchairs for some time to come. There is justification for hope. Please send all donations, however large or small, to the International Spinal Research Trust, Strand House, 10 New Fetter Lane, London, EC4A 1AD. Thank you.